Episode 7 of Beard Banter. I don't expect a large number of people to run up in my background as I'm in the office again this week. So, unlike the show last week, won't get a lot of those interruptions, I wouldn't wager. But
I
today,
don't know. Good.
maybe. You never know. This is the popular door to go out and pee from this office, so it's very possible someone walks by. But yeah, so Jimmy, I'm stupid happy to have you here. I'm probably even more excited about the topic of today, right? And in which we're talking about this magical world one day when we have no more passwords, and we do not live in that way, but simply have other means of authentication. So, Jimmy, tell me about yourself a little bit. For anybody that doesn't know, Jimmy Hatzell, worldwide celebrity, has a beard, so he theoretically qualifies for beard banter in that regard. But yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself for me, bud.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And first of all, super happy and grateful to be on. Um, my, my
It looks
beard looks
very
fake beard.
beardy. Yes, indeed. Very nice, Kelvin.
Hey, I got a shirt
I
on too.
noticed
I
the
got a shirt
cyber
on
drain
too.
shirt. Like, I'm super jelly right now that I don't have a cyber drain shirt to wear yet. It'll have
Hey,
to
he's got them in
happen.
the shop. I don't know if you can buy the shirts through PAX 8 yet. I don't know.
Nice. We haven't added that delivery method yet. So, but anyways, I cut you off,
Yeah,
and
no, good.
it's always nice to have Kelvin in the house. He's a little bit low key, one of my heroes. So, it's always good to have celebrities on. But go ahead and kind of introduce yourself, Jimmy. It sounds like a lot of people already know you, so that shouldn't be a problem. But for those
Yeah,
that don't,
sure. Sure. My name is Jimmy Hatzell. I work for a company called QuickPass, which is cybersecurity for MSPs. Yeah, I've worked in cyber my entire career in one way or the other.
okay,
I joke about this. I am young enough to have one of the first degrees in cybersecurity, and from an actual accredited
from a
program.
real
That was,
accredited
yeah,
program. Yeah,
yeah.
and it probably wasn't out of date by the time you took the course material at all, I would imagine.
Well, it was brand new. It was brand new, but it's like a lot of it's out of date now, to be honest. But
Yeah, yeah.
got to do that. I worked in IT for a number of years for in small businesses. Ran IT. Had my own IT consulting. So I know tons of MSPs. Come up. They start their MSP from, hey, you're the guy who can fix computers. Let me pay you
Yep.
hourly to fix it. And then all of a sudden they've got a business that they need to run, and then
Yeah.
it turns
They're
into
quitting
managed
their jobs
services.
all willy-nilly and, starting companies. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, I've been there myself. I never got to full managed services. I always stayed at a full-time job, but I can definitely appreciate that world. I'm a nerd, technology enthusiast, and basically a couple years ago, from working IT, more IT proper, and running IT for a small healthcare company, I just love cyber, and I knew that I wanted to be at a cybersecurity company. It was
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 years ago now. I saw the explosion was gonna happen, and it happened already in my mind.
Right.
Um, and
Little
little did
did
I
you
know.
know that, like, this is like the beginning of this renaissance of MSPs understanding security in general and SMB as well. So that's funny. Uh,
Yeah. So, and then I found a company called Scout Cybersecurity that was new, or newer to the MSP world. They hadn't really
yep.
started working with MSPs yet. It was really like an MSSP servicing mid market and enterprise customers. Full
Sure.
SOC build out, super cool stuff. And I was actually interviewing to work in the security operations center.
Nice.
Originally, like my first job that I interviewed for was actually an engineer, for the sim or the seam,
How'd
however
that
you pronounce it.
conversation go? Uh,
It
you're not good enough at this, but Jimmy, you can really sell. I think you should be in the community side. Or
I
how'd that
swear to
happen?
God. So the first person that interviewed me said, "I really like you. You seem to know a lot, but I'm looking for someone with about 10 more years experience than you."
Oh my God.
But then they sent me off, and I went and interviewed for some other roles, and eventually I found myself in touch with the CEO. His name's Aiden Kehoe. He was the founder and CEO of Scout. And he said, I want you to join, but I want you, we're going to start selling to MSPs, and I want you to really start this, and
Sure.
work in the go to market team, and come over on the sales side. And he said the first thing I want you to learn is sales, and I want you to work on the sales team.
Sure.
And he said, because it's the hardest thing ever, and people underestimate it. And we're going to work with MSPs, and they're going to be trying to sell. So unless you have tried to sell cybersecurity before, you're not going to understand how hard it
Well,
is. So
you know, brother, you just touched on something, right? Because, like, I think part of this challenge is being in sales in cybersecurity specifically, especially to the SMB and MSP space. You're actually an educator. Like,
mhm.
more than a salesperson, these people are wrestling with, how do I deliver security? How do I, and you now have to bring them to some educational curve before you can even have the conversation that drives them down this need cycle, right? For you to be able to do that. So it makes it a very interesting. So I think what you just said there was kind of, to unpack that, was actually quite prescient, right? Like this,
Yeah.
I need people that can actually have done this and can sell, but can also teach them to sell. And that's because, yeah, a lot of the challenges there. We could spend a lot of time on that conversation.
No, and it was totally like a case study, like a small scale, like go in, yeah, hi, like go in. We were phasing out the direct business, but go in, learn how it works and how it's going, and then we'll figure out what to do next. And I did that for like 2 months,
Yeah.
and then they put me in to run marketing, and I ran marketing for Scout for almost 4 years before, or 3 years before getting acquired by Barracuda, and then worked at Barracuda for a little bit as well, and then came over to QuickPass to build out their marketing. But I
Yeah.
am, I'm one of the few marketers in this world who have a cyber background, a technical background as well.
It
So
helps.
yeah, it helps
It
a
helps a
ton. It
lot.
helps a ton.
Yeah. One of my challenges, and this is, I think across the board, but vendors, MSPs, MSSPs, if you want to believe in that delineation, I don't. But if you lay that out there, oftentimes the marketing team are making promises that no one can deliver. They're inaccurate in the things they're discussing. They're framing things in the wrong way. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just think it comes from not being a tactician, right? I think it comes from not turning the wrench and going, hey, this is how you bust your knuckles, and here's how you keep the wrench on the bolt, right? Like, there's an understanding of those nuances that doesn't often make it to marketing. So I think that's been quite a benefit for you, right? And it makes the marketing land significantly more genuine, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's like in the marketing world, like now there's like this big emphasis on like community marketing and
Yep.
like it's so
Thought
funny
leadership
being.
marketing, and yeah,
Yeah, and it's like
yeah,
being with peers, like marketing peers at other software companies and B2B companies. They're like looking at it like a like some like fishbowl or something. Like, how do we join the community and how do we do
yeah.
community marketing? Or someone like you and me, it's like we're in the community. Like we
Yeah,
just talk and be ourselves. It's like
100%. Yeah, it's not fake, right? It's not seen as disingenuous in some degree, right? I mean, I think that's key to it, right? It's the Rob Ray. I mean, if you look at Rob Ray and what he is in the community and the way that built and the way Datto built around that, I think it's a pretty example of that genuine community marketing, right? Like genuinely being involved in that. So say what you will about Datto, I think that's a great example, and maybe it's a little self-aggrandizing because that is kind of what I do. So like I would like to be seen as good at it. But yeah, no, for sure. And so then, at your scout years, you came in driving marketing, driving that kind of community understanding of marketing there, and then now it sounds like you've landed at a new location at QuickPass. Tell me how that kind of happened, if you will, if you're allowed to. Sounds
yeah,
like a
sure.
fantastic opportunity for you.
Yeah, I the founders, Jim and Mateo, reached out to me. Mateo has a large background of experience working in Silicon Valley and New York,
Sure.
and Silicon Alley, they call it, developing software for enterprise companies and all that. Yeah,
Thanks, buddy.
so on Wednesday. Um, and then Jim worked and ran an MSP himself as well. So, they asked me to get on a call, and they basically said, we have a great product. A lot of MSPs use it.
Yeah.
And we want to amplify marketing, and we haven't really done marketing before. And we want you to come in and build everything. So, I was like, okay, I've had conversations like this before. All right,
Sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure. You
If you're
say you
good
have
at what
a
you do, you have a lot of them, right? Like it's
yeah.
kind of how that works out, fortunate or otherwise.
But then I went online and I started doing my homework and like, seeing what people were saying. And I was like, wow, actually a lot of people do use this. And like, oh, they actually do have
Yeah.
some traction, and called some people and got good feedback on them. and a couple calls later, decided to come on board, and
Yeah.
it's crazy. Like, I think I was the 12th or 13th employee, and we just hit 20 the other day. So
Nice.
it was like,
Congratulations.
yeah, it was like 3 weeks. So like we're growing fast, and it's really fun. I really like this stage of a
Yeah.
company, and to be able to grow with it and have a
Well, you
big
have a huge amount of
say.
autonomy. You can run with an idea in just a second, right? And you start getting into 1,000 employees, and it's a little harder to be that agile in some of these things, right? And so I imagine it is the magical time. So we've
Yeah,
spent 10 minutes getting to know each other, and I don't want to be dis to our topic. And so what I want to do is set the stage for this. And for anybody watching, I'm going to do it a little bit ELI 5. I apologize, but when we talk about passwordless, it's a nice marketing term, right? It's a great buzzword. It's fantastic. But what is it really talking about? So at the core of it, what it really boils down to is traditional authentication is made up of three types of authentication. You have type 1, which is something I know. Password, right? Gotcha. Type 2, something I have, something I physically possess. Most often, that's a cell phone, whether it's a text message, whether it's an application, whether it's something else in that fashion, or it's going to be something which is my favorite, like a FIDO2 token, right? Or something that's WebAuthn or TOTP, but a second factor, something you have. And then the third would be something you are, right? So biometrics, thumbprints, those type of things. When we
hair,
start
beard,
talking,
DNA.
beard hair DNA is great. You just put a little slit in there, it does a little
Yeah.
Bernie thing, and then yeah, 100%. It's like that's Matt. But no, so it's all of these different types of things, very creative things. Some people even do dwell time and flight time, right? How long did it take me to leave my H and go to a J, and how long was I in the air between those, and how long do I hold an H down, and how long do I hold the J down on my keyboard, right? So when you're talking about passwordless, most often what they're doing is removing the type 1 authentication or shifting the type 1 authentication. And here's why. If I'm a threat actor and I trick poor Jimmy into signing into an evil Jinx or evil Jinx 2, however you want to say it, man in the middle proxy, and I capture his password, I can go reuse that password anywhere that collects and uses that password. So if that's Office 365, I can go to Office 365 and sign in. I have that type 1 authentication. What they're doing when you're talking passwordless is you're shifting off to I'm going to read that in a second, but hold on. You're shifting, caught my right eye, but you're shifting off to a type 2, likely, and a type 3, or some combination of type 2s and 3s, or even sexier, a type 2 that has its own type 1 pair. So think of a FIDO token that has a PIN. That PIN is only valid on that FIDO token, and in that context, signing into that service, which means traditional keyloggers, stuff that's going to get all my typing and store it and know that that's a password because it came right after QuickBooks.com and then my username and my password, right? So they're going to take those things and shift them out to something that I can't capture with a keylogger. Or if I do, it's only contextually relevant if it's with this type 2 authentication. If it's with this FIDO token and the PIN number I use, of course, is 12341234. Perhaps I've said too much. Let's roll this back. No, but the point is, passwordless attempts to use other factors than something that's immediately capturable to determine if it's Jimmy or if it's not Jimmy, right? And so if I have missed anything on kind of the summation, is Christopher's not wrong, dude. He goes, everyone would have access to Matt's system if all they needed was beard DNA. Yeah, I shed like a damn dog. They're everywhere. Like the hotel, I have to leave $20 just to say I'm sorry. Like, yeah, it's
Even
crazy.
I have to do the almost daily keyboard cleanup.
Oh,
Like
it's
flip
rough,
it
bro.
upside
Yeah,
down, alcohol
yeah.
wipes, the whole deal.
That's funny, but that's kind of what we're talking about in passwordless. And so I do dream of a world where we are authenticating in ways that are significantly more real time, that are constantly happening, right? Think about passwords. When I sign into a website, I only sign in once. As soon as I sign in, that session is valid for sometimes long times, right? Like by Microsoft default, I think it's 6 months is the default time frame for an OAuth token. So I think the conversation comes back to much more real time, constantly. Is that still Jimmy? Did Jimmy get up and walk away? And is that no longer Jimmy sitting there? So what are your thoughts on passwordless? It's going to happen tomorrow, right, Jimmy? Isn't that the best way? We're real close.
I wish. I was doing some reading online, and it seems people, the guess is like 2040 is a good guess
Okay.
on when we will get rid of them. And it's going to take a long time, a long time to get there. And the reason is, like, we have these legacy systems. What you talked about that advantage of moving right to SaaS applications, and yeah,
Yeah.
like the newest applications will implement passwordless per default. And I think it's something to note here. It's not going to be because of security in most cases. It'll be because of UI and sexiness.
Bro, you just
So
hit that nail so hard on the head that you hit it in one shot. You ever seen the guys that can like do framing hammers one shot? Like you just one shot at that nail. So like honestly, you talk about that. The Starbucks CISO gave a speech at CSA, an executive conference that I was at for CSA. It was a little side thing. And he was talking about how they went passwordless, right? So they took their baristas, their systems, their core access systems, and went passwordless. They ended up going with a FIDO2 tokens that they could just plug in, type in a pin, hit their enter key, and press the button. And what's funny was they didn't win on security merit at all. When he got that through the board, he won by saying, "Could you imagine if all 15,000 stores had a barista that could sell coffee 30 seconds faster?" Because now signing into the POS is simply plug, go. That's huge, right?
yeah,
It's a business enabler. So yeah, you hit the nail right on the top of the head about the fact that, it's going to come from good UI and a better experience, right? A much more predictable experience around your signing in, and there's barriers to entry to that, right? Like, so I'm going to share a screen here real quick. There's a website called SSO.tax. Are you familiar with it?
yeah. It's the wall of shame too, right? And
It
like,
is the wall of shame.
yeah,
Yeah, 100%. And so I'll go ahead and share this real quick. But, the wall of shame is SSO.tax. And so when we talk about it's going to be a problem, to get through this, it's because one of the core components of going passwordless is having an identity provider that can be extended into your SaaS applications, that can be extended in, that says, once I know this is Jimmy and Jimmy's in the conference, all the different conference booths he walks up to, Jimmy's already authenticated. He should be able to access it because he's here. This is Jimmy. And so if you go look at, the SSO wall of shame, like some of these places go from $10 on base to $60 per user just to be able to have SSO, right? $25 to 60, 7 to 10. I think when I was at my former MSP, we spent like $130,000 a year just on SSO tax, just paying for these increases. Like Dropbox, for example, I think you have to have the enterprise SKU to have Dropbox have SSO. And so, I say all this really to point out that I think you're absolutely correct. We're a long way on the time horizon for this being ubiquitous, right? For this being across the board, everybody's using it. And so in the interim, you have this challenge, right? And this challenge is, how do you use legacy authentication models, right? That are type 1, pretty much just type 1, maybe some type 2 with like a TOTP code, which is horrible. But how do you deal with that? And I think that's kind of what's interesting is you've landed at an answer, right? Is that is one of the things they principally do is bridge that gap in privileged access management, in access management that's just in time for JIT-GIA, right? You're just in time, just enough access. And so, I think you hit the point that we've got a long time till then. And so if we were going to give some prescriptive advice, what would you say to people trying to figure out this struggle towards working with passwords and getting them under control, which is the first challenge, and then eventually using that to start driving towards a passwordless world, if that was their endeavor? Like, what would be your advice there?
Sure. Well, first of all, like, it's important to keep perspective on this. Like, security, in the security world, we have a tendency to like be, like,
Arrogant?
a little,
Oh,
yeah, a
sorry.
little
That's
arrogant,
not out loud.
yeah, a little snobby about things. But let's be real. Like the average person, just to pull up some statistics in my notebooks, completely uncited sources. So somebody
Yeah.
else
That
can
most,
look at that.
I think 90% of all statistics are made up on the spot 60% of the time.
There you go. I think Abe Lincoln said that.
Yeah, it might
So
be.
the average business user has 191 passwords.
Sure.
Every hour, on average, we are logging into a new service or system somewhere, whether it's unlocking our computer, logging into our
Yeah.
email, whatever it is. Every single hour we're doing this on the computer. I'm sure we're doing it on the phone more as well. And people like you and I are probably doing it even more than that. So like when you talk about like, when you talk about like, oh, make a unique password for every single account, like no average person can remember 190 unique passwords. It's just impossible. And
you can if you put an exclamation point after this one. And no, you can't.
Yeah, you have Matt and then like Zoom exclamation point. And like
I actually use Jimmy's beard is better than mine as my usual passphrase that I use. Yeah, it keeps me humble. So
yeah, there you go. I like that. That's
no,
mine's Matt's beard is better than mine.
But I think what you're getting at is password managers are the interim aspect of this, right? And hopefully tied to a single sign-on source, right? Where I sign into my password manager from this one principal SSO that I can control, whether that's Azure Active Directory, whether that's Okta, whether that's Google, whether that's AWS and their services. But the ultimate point is some core identity that is the virgin perfect world. This is what I'm going to use. It's got all my conditional access policies. It's got the ability to actually really, really protect that front end. And hopefully it's passwordless, but then it signs into your password manager, right? And it gives you access to those, poor legacy credentials that cannot be converted yet. Have I jumped the gun on your advice, Jimmy? Is that pretty well we're heading?
You're spot on. You're spot on. You need a password manager in today's world. It's just impossible to function without it. And you take all the steps, you enable all the security options to protect that one account. But the alternative, like it is just the best. It's not necessarily the best option. It's the least worst option, right?
Fair. Fair. And like, God dang it, change your stupid passwords. Like I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody go, I got a password manager. Yeah, but every fucking password's the same goddamn password. You didn't change a thing. Like you just stored all the same passwords. Like so don't miss the point that you have to iterate through those passwords and at least change them to be unique as part of that endeavor too, right? Like you can't just collect them and gather them. But I've seen that one.
Absolutely. And like not all accounts are the same too. So like if you're an MSP, like your average employees, whatever Canva account or whatever, like, I don't know, like random,
love Canva, by the way, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Like some random account that's not as, privileged as say, access to like an admin account on an Active Directory server of one of their clients or all of their clients, or an O365 tenant admin, or their internal systems. So like,
you're starting to talk about external risk, right? You're starting to talk about not just risk to you on an internal systems and your internal Canva and your internal aspect, right? But this risk of you're now accessing someone else's sovereign system in which you have fiduciary responsibility, right? You now are the asset kind of risk holder in that way. And Bryson does make a fantastic point. This is like fighting with a corked bat, though. Like Bryson's a genius in security anyway, but accurate. Like let the generator generate it for you. Don't think that you can come up with enough entropy for you to generate passwords yourself, right? You're going to have the same patterns. You're going to have the same attack surface that plays out, whereas a random generator is not. And set them long. Make them 12, 20, 30 characters. I know it's a pain in the ass when you got to type it into your hulu.com at home on TV. But other than that, it's definitely worth having long passwords. They're significantly harder to crack cryptographically.
I have to give Bryson credit here because he shared something, Passwordle, which was just my favorite.
I saw that on his link. I was like, that's so good.
Yeah. So my a friend of mine, he gets the Wordle in like a minute, like every single day. And then there's also Loodle, which is like lewd words, and he gets that in like a minute every day. So he does the Wordle and he does the Loodle. Yeah, it might be better for you. I don't know. It was better for me.
It's in my vernacular for sure.
But I sent him Passwordle, and I'm like, you can't do this one, huh?
That's so good. So it's a legit service. I thought it was a joke. I thought this was Passwordle was a bit of humorous, but it actually exists.
I don't know. He might have had like a joke one, but I Googled it and somebody did make one.
So good.
His was like SHA-256 hashes of like other word, like the daily Wordle or something like that.
That's so funny.
Hilarious.
Oh, I love it. But yeah, the point is like the delineations and that makes that significantly harder if you're solving for star, tilde, you know, D, capital HR. It's significantly harder. But
Yeah,
anyways,
like statistically unreasonable to try to brute force. Like,
yeah,
there's
yeah,
no
for
reason why
sure.
every password shouldn't be that way. Like, it's
Yeah.
just it's too easy. It's easy now with the password managers. But yeah,
F12 hack it. Yeah, man, you got to get in and do that Missouri disencryption. F12 is the universal decryptor. So, um, I digress. It's so good, but yeah. So I mean, so this is the starting point. So let's assume you now have, as a human, reached this blissful state where you have a core identity provider. It's ready and willing to set up your SAML and OIDC integrations for access. And you've got your password manager and it's tied and it's got those things in it. And I think, what I've always loved about doing that next step and getting the password manager, getting the passwords delineated, right? Getting those things to where you do have some segmentation and answers for how am I going to manage these passwords that I share with other people, right? When you get down into that service provider level, those admin credentials, those type of things. And
are
um,
you
uh,
tracking too?
yeah.
Who
Are you
accessed it?
tracking?
When?
Can you
Yeah.
meet when you talk about your AAA, right? Your authentication, authorization, and accountability, we want to know who did it. And so you have to get into that part of it too. And it's really monstrous, right? Because even if you're tracking a single password and credential, and I write down the credential, if it's not being rotated, if it's not being changed, you actually have no attribution aspect, right? I can still argue that Matt wrote that down, took it home, and used it, right? As opposed to having to get a new one each time. And I think that's where you're heading is some of the things that you guys do is actually rotate those passwords, store them up to date so that you can actually find some degree of attribution in a fairly hard to attribute world.
Yeah.
And so I love that. But one of the things that I was going to make a point about is when I was at my former MSP, when I wrapped up, I had 66 applications in single sign-on, right? I mean, to even have 66 that you could name right now is pretty tough, but you kind of hit on it, right? It's all the things, it's all the HubSpots and you got to get into your Passwordle account and, it's all of those things. But what I did was once we had password managers, those became the hunting ground for those applications, right? Especially if you have some systemic password manager where you can look at it top down and say, I've got 72 users using Dropbox. Maybe that's the next one that has the most impact that I can go single sign on and drive down that path. And so don't miss that your password managers become hunting grounds. And one of the things I'd say to a person working at a password management space would be learn to report on those. Learn to give me high aggregate reporting that can say, all my customers that are now in this, they have this many applications that are on that hunting ground. And if our password manager people could go far enough to say, and they support SAML, and they support OIDC, now you could almost be that bridge gap of intelligence that drives us towards being able to hunt through that and find and secure ourselves to drive towards a passwordless world, right? Where we can use a passwordless identity provider on the front end that has extensibility for those AAAs all the way down to the consuming entity. But yeah, sorry, little off tangent here.
No, no, you're spot on. I mean, we're on the way there. It's going to take a while. You should SSO everything you possibly can. It's much better practice than having passwords. But you need like an audit trail, and especially with the increase of attacks, the
There's
cyber
no
insurance.
attacks
Yeah.
happening. Cyber insurance isn't changing in any material way because of like loss of actuarial data and assumptions that were made. Pshaw.
Well, yeah, no. So you look at the big thing everybody's talking about right now is all the cyber insurance providers. Their grand thing of how they can calculate risk now and like do
Yeah.
it all. They're like, you have to have MFA enabled. That was like their big thing. We won't cover it unless MFA is enabled, which
Yeah.
is a
All the
great
way down to the
step.
switch, right? I'm looking at you, travelers. Yeah, but I get it. I want to touch on a couple of comments here. So, Michael Schwartz asked, "What about random passphrase generators instead of random characters?" Yeah, all day. Love
Yeah.
passphrases. I usually use my passphrases, Michael, as the front end credentials, right, to my identity providers because it's long, it's got spaces, there's words in it. You can put some uppercase and some characters in it as well. But then that accesses random passwords just because the random character generation that exists is always going to have a very high entropy and words typically don't have as high of an entropy. I mean, as they're spaced out, they certainly would. But my opinion would be passphrases are used for the front end of what you have to remember. And then the back end credentials stored in password managers are just massive random generations. And if you can find one that'll let you put in some Jindy reference, even better. Like then it's just fun because then you hope your password had Jindy in it and it went somewhere. But
And
the other
even
piece,
even
go ahead,
oh,
Jimmy.
sorry. No, just on the back end too. If it can be injected without the user being able to see what the password is even better as well, especially for shared credentials.
It is, and I think that adds an arguable amount of defensibility. I think it doesn't stand up super well, right? Because most
Mhm.
forms-based authentication, that injection
You
is
can
still
just
somewhat
flip it.
trackable in the F12. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I would say that part of it. But I agree, right? Part of what your role is and what your company's role is to find ways to add to that story, to add
It's
to that
layers.
attribution story, right? And that's part of it. So I've never really been behind the hide the password they won't find it because I'm a find it guy. So,
Oh yeah, and then you got to
yeah,
change it
but
every day too. So
yeah. Oh, true story. Now you have a
yeah,
much shorter time window too. And Dan Johnson. So just speaking of who this is, Dan Johnson's actually a rock star, good friend of mine, owner of an MSP, probably one of the more forward-looking and thinking MSPs, which I admire because I can only ever look forward and sideways at the same time. So anytime it's always forward, it's good. No, Dan's great, but he asked the question of, what about conditional access requirements for the password manager? Dan, that's kind of my point, right? Like if I SSO into my password manager, then I bring that attribution of those conditional access policies and requirements back to the front end of my IDP, whether that's Okta or Microsoft or whoever. And so what I would do is I would make a quick pass SAML application and a quick pass conditional access policy that has certain requirements and restrictions of which I'm okay with before signing into quick pass. And a great example might be, even though you're signing into Office and Outlook, not as big a deal. But if you want to use that same OAuth token to sign into your password manager, now you're going to need to be coming from an Azure Active Directory bound machine. It needs to be encrypted. It has to pass this last compliancy check. It must be up to date. It also has to have these tools. So like you can get into crafting those CAs back at the point of collection. The other reason I really, really love IDP centric collection and attribution is the IDP centric place is under my control. So even if the software provider sucks at logging or has horrible attribution kind of context and things that it's doing, I can say, here's where this person authenticated, and here's where I passed this answer back to that consuming entity. And so I can actually track that sign-in aspect. I might not be able to track the authorization and the other things that go in that side, but I can certainly track the accountability of that authentication, at least in that stage. So yes, Dan, 100%. I'm with you. I just like to own that in the IDP rather than in the password manager themselves. But you would like to have things like, conditional requirements for passwords. Like inside the
yeah,
password manager, if I open 9 passwords, fine. If I go open 172, red flag. Maybe we have some problems that escape. And then Dan Johnson agrees with one thing, is exactly what he was thinking. The Daniel Johnson brilliant comment, I'm wagering, and he's not wrong. he's definitely brilliant. I love it. But anyways, yeah. So now we're at this stage of we kind of have a plan forward. We understand that in order to be passwordless, we have to be SSO'd. See, we do have a Dom. Dom just
yeah. There
walked
you
by.
go.
There's Tom Kirby right there. I can't move my finger to follow him backwards, though. It doesn't work, apparently. But anyway, so we now have this password manager. It's filled with all the passwords. We're rotating passwords on the places where we cannot replace them. Right. And I kind of want to touch on something you said earlier, like when we're talking about the critical problem of MSPs today, right? An MSP needing to get in an admin a credential to go into Microsoft and do something in their portal for their client. Those type of things are shifting to IDP as well. Microsoft, I can now talk about it. I've been on the GDAPS advisory space for Dan did just kudos himself, and it was brilliant. He did a great job at it too. Yeah, but I was on the advisory panel for Microsoft's GDAP, which is their granular delegated administration permissions. What GDAP does is now you're just Jimmy. When you sign into that third-party tenant, you still sign in as Jimmy Hatzell at quickpass.com. You are not actually faking an identity anymore. You're starting to actually be the pseudo you that signs in and does work. And so now attribution is still you, very attributed through Microsoft's entire ecosystem. And I bring that up to say these vendors are starting to figure this out. To
Yeah.
your point, it might be 2040, but they are starting to figure this out and drive down this path to understand the rest of the ramifications beyond just the first authentication, the authorization aspects and extensibility, the authentication and the accountability aspects of tracking what happened and where we're going. So a lot of this is restricted, not my intent. So Dan's now saying, I misread it, and Simi kudos to him. Like, I got you, bro, 100%. Dan Johnson was saying it's exactly what he was thinking about the CA methodologies, not about Dan Johnson, and I simply misread it. It's a little sus, Dan, a little sus. Anyways, I digress. But yeah, so I don't want to keep everybody too terribly long. We're getting towards the end of it, and so what I'd love to do is give me some closing thoughts on where you feel people are today. I'd like to know, in your mind, how far down this journey we just talked about, right? From crappy reused passwords to password manager, to password manager bolted into an identity source, to password manager that also additionally rotates those passwords that I know are high sensitivity, high risk, or high need of attribution. Where would you put MSPs in that space?
I think, well, I'll talk about general users first. I think
Okay.
the general users are aware there is a problem now. And that's as far as we've gotten. So you show, well, you show someone the dark web report of all their passwords, and it's less shocking to people as it was 5 years ago because they've seen it before. They're aware that they're constantly getting breached, and that's bad.
Oh, it's funny. So yeah, so the general user is now aware. I laughed and cut you off, but
no, and MSPs are starting to, the top 1 to 10% of their applications are using this like best practices. That's on the way to passwordless, but still, like in most cases, 90% of logins and stuff are still going to be based on passwords, and we gotta, that's where. Like that's where the security flaws are going to come from, right? That's where the 0 days and CVEs are coming from.
Yeah. SolarWinds 1, 2, 3, right? Like, I mean, that's that's where they come from for sure.
So we've got some work to do still for a long time.
I'm with you. I think that we, like so many things in security, we're a very soft target, right? My mission and what drives me is that my children will not have the same experience as I did running and growing up in virgin technology land where everything was just magical and the world was beautiful and all this capability. And I had a Nintendo, for God's sakes. Like, I could actually do that instead of dream it up in a ditch in the back. Like, and so you start getting into this world where if our kids are going to have that same life, we can't hemorrhage $7.8 trillion a year in cyber loss. We can't let our intellectual property disappear. We can't let the confidence in our financial systems erode. And so as I think about that, like, we really are in a bad place. Passwords are probably one of the worst pieces of this, combined with lack of MFA adoption. And between those two, I can relatively guess that if Jimmy uses Hunter 2, or that might be Dom, uses Hunter 2 on his Instagram account, he's probably using it on his corporate access. And he's probably using it on his Facebook. And he's probably using it on all these other services that we use. And so if I was a threat actor today, low caveat, I am not a threat actor. I do nothing illegal. But if I was, it's such a soft target. The barrier to entry is not very high. The level of protection is almost abysmal. And so what I would leave us with as we wrap this up is go through your password manager if you already have one and see what kind of crossover you have. See how many of those are actually secure passwords and how many of them are your dog's name, the year you were born, and an exclamation point still. Right? Like, of course it is trickery, Hunter 2 exclamation point FB, which, by the way, is not all that hard to fuzz the delineations in that password, right? Like, it's nothing hard, nothing illegal. Yes, nothing proved to be illegal, Bryson, as I understand it. So I'll give it a caveat. But yeah, I think that people need to go and take action out of this. I would love to know that someone comments below and says, hey, because of this, I put in new passwords, or because of this, I went and established an SSO to my password manager, or added a FIDO2 token. I've got a new webinar series I'm doing called Protect Yourself with FIDO. And I'm going to be walking people through how to add those FIDO tokens to protect themselves on their Xbox account and on their Chase banking account. And I'm going to see if Dom will let me put it on his financial accounts. My code. of course, not his. But anyways, so thank you guys for paying attention. Jimmy, any closing words before we drop out of this? I know we could probably talk about passwords for forever, but nobody wants to hear it that long. So
Yeah, I'll just say that security is a process. It's not a single product. So, you know, you got
it is a process.
Security is a process. So you
Yeah.
set to where you're going, passwordless in 20 years, and you make a plan, you work on it as you go.
Dude, this Matthew Fox dude's mustache is so money. Like, that is
good.
money.
It's so good.
Yeah. And Michael's got it right. I try to live with plausible deniability, my friend. Yeah, it is a process. And so many times marketing people, and you and I talked about this before the show, but so many times marketing people get this wrong. And they live in this histrionics. Buy my product and we'll stop everything. Have zero trust and the world is solved. And I think it does us a disservice. And it makes those educators like you and me have to fight an uphill battle to say, no, I can get by Sentinel-1 with PowerShell right now. I can do these things are merely pieces in the puzzle to create the, if you want to go Microsoft, the Swiss cheese model, if you want to go, whatever, but creating layered defense. But ultimately, it's the weak and stupid stuff that usually gets us popped. And using the same password is probably the simplest thing you can explain to people. So, yeah, cool.
Work on your cyber hygiene.
Amen, brother. Well, Jimmy, it's been a blast, and I always appreciate having my friends come on and get to chat about security. I joke I have a face I drew on the wall in my office. It's because at some point people are tired of hearing me talk about cybersecurity, and I just go talk to the face. Like, it never complains. It's wonderful. It's like Wilson. So anyways, thanks for being on today, guys, and appreciate the comments in the chat. It made it super, super fun. So see you guys later.
Thanks, everyone, for the banter.
The banter.